My name's Gordon Thomson, and I lead the go-to-market strategy for Cisco's products in EMEAR. And I'd like to spend some time with you this morning talking about the impact of the digital business on the network. There is no doubt that over the last couple of years, as most organizations begin to become more digital and desire to become more digital, that this is having a significant impact on the IT department and having a significant impact in the way that we run the network. And I'd like to explore with you this morning some of the issues that potentially are arising for the networking teams, and also talk a little bit about what Cisco's doing to try and resolve some of those issues at the same time. So hopefully you'll enjoy the next 30 minutes or so. Normally when I present to audiences, I was always taught in the past that if you're presenting to an audience of 50 or more, 20% of the audience are listening to you intently. 30% of the audience are thinking about something back at work that they should really be doing just now, that they shouldn't really be here for. And 50% of you are fantasizing. So I'll be watching the faces just to see who's the 50%. So let's get into this. Hopefully the clicker will work, but it doesn't seem to be working. Or else we're going nowhere. Try again. Green lights are flashing, but nothing's happening. Okay, here we go. So there's many operational challenges impacting our businesses today, especially the IT departments. You just have to look at the lack of security skills that are present in the UK, across Europe and across the world today, and the impact that that's having on the cost of labor. At the same time, we're beginning to see bandwidth costs come down. But we're collecting far more data than we've ever collected before in our lives, and we're transmitting that data across our organization. So at the same time as bandwidth costs are coming down, they're not coming down at the speed of our data requirements going up, and we're running into an issue around bandwidth economics. And as we mentioned earlier on, most organizations are actually beginning to realize that the network isn't a commodity anymore. It's actually something that can bring value, and that's putting more and more pressure onto IT organizations. At the same time, we're going through these massive IT transformations. The impact of mobility in your organization. How many devices do we connect to the network today compared to what we connected to the network a couple of years ago? In our organization, we've been about 75,000 employees for the last 5-6 years. 5 years ago, we had 140,000 devices connected to our network. Today we have just under 500,000 devices connected to our network, and by the year 2020 we expect to have around 2 million devices connected to our network. Now the leader of our IT organization doesn't really have any more budget to be able to deal with all of that, but has to handle that, has to deal with that complexity. At the same time, we're wondering where to put our applications. Do we put our applications and resources in our data center? Do we put them in the public cloud? Do we put them in a SaaS provider? Where do we put them? And how do we deal with those strategies? What do we do with IoT? There's many, many more things connecting to the network now. That's why, in our organization, the number of devices connected to the network's expected to be around 2 million by the year 2020. And with all of these things connected to the network, what's the impact on risk? What's the impact on us being attacked by increasing that threat vector all of the time? So these are real challenges that are putting a significant pressure on the network, a pressure that didn't exist before. Because most of the CIOs I go to talk to today talk about these three things. They talk about reliability. They talk about the need to make sure the network's secure, and yeah, the network better delivers strong performance for me. All of these things are really important and will continue to be really important, but these three things alone are not going to deliver the value that a digital business will need if it's going to be successful in the future. The network has to do more. The network has to evolve. I call this today's network, but this might be tomorrow's network for a lot of our customers. But in reality, the network of today needs to provide much better visibility than it's ever provided before around what's going on in the environment. It needs to deal with compliance more effectively than it's ever done before. It needs to think about how programmable the network can be in the future, thinking that on average 95% of the things we do in the network today are manual. Within 5 years, 95% of the things we do in the network need to be automated. and that's driven by programmability. And then at the same time, how do we deal with cloud? How do we ready our networks to deal with cloud effectively moving forward? So these are all things that as we invest in network infrastructure today, we have to prepare for, we have to think about, and we need to think about the strategies of how we're going to deploy that. And at the same time, I say to customers, you're buying a network infrastructure today, not just for today or for tomorrow. You're buying it to last for 5 to 7 years probably. And during that time frame, the network better do this as well. The network better understand behaviors so that we can deal with security in a way that we've never been able to deal with it before. The network better be fully automated. The network better be able to pull real time, not an hour old, not a day old, not 15 minutes old, but real time analytical insight so we can use that to secure better and automate better as we move forward. So this is a vision of the network. This is a vision of what the network needs to do as we move forward. It needs to be more intuitive than it's ever been before. And I even use that word autonomic in the same way as all of these car manufacturers now talk about the autonomous cars that are going to be driving around all of the UK and the Europe over the next few years. Most CIOs are scared about the thought of making their network fully autonomic. But the reality is many parts of our network will need to become autonomic over the next few years. I'd like to explain more of why that needs to happen in a minute or two. So this is a great vision. We'll go and talk to our customers about this vision. People will nod their heads and go, okay, I get that. But nobody does anything. Nobody changes. Everyone just carries on the way they carry on. And the reality is that's nobody's fault. The reason why nobody changes is we're caught in a world of overwhelming complexity. We just don't know how to get to that place of tomorrow. All these things that we have to deal with now down the right-hand side of this slide, we never had to deal with a few years ago. Open APIs into the network. Come on. We never had to deal with that a few years ago. Multi-cloud environments, policy across the network, across all of our devices. All of these things are much newer, much more important, much more relevant. And it's causing us a challenge. We don't know how to get from where we are today to where we need to get to tomorrow. The reality is, the network isn't going to become any less complex unless we do something about it. And I worry that ultimately we as humans are not going to be able to scale to deal with the complexity of the network environment moving forward. So we need to think differently, we need to act differently, we need to do things differently. Let me give you a couple of examples. Here's a major bank in the UK and a retailer in the Nordics. The major bank in the UK has about 8,000 IT staff. It has 866,000 devices on the network. So on average, each IT person is managing about 100 devices. Okay, pretty regulated environment, so it's pretty IT heavy. In a less regulated environment, the retail environment you see on the other side, they only have 2,500 staff. They have 605,000 devices connected to their network today, and they have about 200 people in IT department per device. Now, I say device, and device is maybe an old world way of looking at it, but let's stick with device for a minute. On average, the IT person is managing, therefore, 200 devices per person. Now, why 200 devices per person? Well, it's a pretty complex world. It's a pretty complex world that they need to manage out there. And ultimately, they're trying to do two things. They're trying to knit everything together to make sure that everything operates properly. But at the same time, they're trying to provide a really fantastic user experience to you and me. They want to make sure that you and me don't even know the network's there. It just exists, and you can operate on it on any device. And at the same time, they'd have to be ready for the fact that some things go wrong and we're going to be compromised along the way. So this is why today it's around 200 employees per device. Now, I mentioned device earlier on, and that's maybe an old world way of looking at it. Let me paint you a scenario. So, I walk into a meeting room. I have my iPhone as I walk into a meeting room. I'm going into a meeting to use a telepresence unit, which is in the room. Wouldn't it be great if I walked into the room and I was using wireless location analytics to recognize that I've walked into the room. It recognizes it's me. It syncs, and then syncs with proximity to the telepresence unit. The telepresence unit uses facial recognition to recognize it's me. It syncs with Outlook, recognizes I've got a meeting coming up at 10 o'clock, and at 10 o'clock the meeting comes into operation. Now just think of everything in the back end that's gone on to make that happen. Now, while that meeting's happening, the back-end systems are talking to the facilities management system because the wireless location-based systems have recognized how many people are in the room. Gordon's booked a room for 12 people. Only 3 people have shown up. So isn't that great information to take back into our facilities systems afterwards so that Gordon Thomson can be told afterwards, actually, you shouldn't have booked that room for 12 people, Gordon, you should have booked that room for 4 people. And at the same time, that system's connected to the heating system. It was set up, the seating system was set up for 12 people in the room, but now there's only 3. Probably we need to increase the heating slightly. And at the same time, when the meeting finishes, we put the lights out. Now, what I've just painted a scenario is a real-life scenario that can happen today. But you think about the manual processes that would be in place in the normal working environment to connect all of those things together. In the past, you'd only have to worry about, is the mobile phone connected to the wireless network? Yes. Is the telepresence system working? Yes. Is the wide area network providing quality of service for the telepresence system? Yes. But today we have to do many, many more things to provide that seamless user experience that you and I want. Because you and I don't want to walk into the room and have to press 15 different buttons to start a meeting. We want to walk into the room and do nothing. The reality of that situation is the IT professional in the future is going to have to manage 1 to 1 million connections, not 1 to 200 devices. And the reality for those 2 organizations is the bank on the left-hand side, who had 8,000 staff, is now going to have to employ another 47,000 staff. And the retailer is going to have to employ another 19,000 staff. So everybody worries about in IT, oh, automation is going to get rid of my job. Automation is the death knell of the engineer. It's not. The reality is we are going to expect the engineer to do far more in the future than they do today, and automation is just absolutely only just going to keep the company running for the future. So this is the reality of what we're trying to solve for as we move forward. So Cisco Strategy has been evolving over the last 4 or 5 years to deal with that. Some of you can come in isolation and look at some of our product areas, and a lot of them are becoming much more software-based. A lot of them are more open, northbound into APIs, and you go, yeah, that's good, Cisco. Okay? But at the same time, what you maybe don't see is we're not creating these capabilities in silos anymore. These capabilities are coming together in a platform. These things are being integrated and brought together to do 2 things: to make the user experience better and to make the back-end experience for IT much more easy to manage in the longer term. And our principles are therefore about delivering and building a platform for the future. Cisco used to build products. We moved from products to build solutions. Solutions are proprietary. You probably don't want proprietary in the future. You want to be open, extensible. You want it to be scalable. The reality is platforms do all of that. And even organizations like Cisco, who have been great at trying to sell you the benefits of proprietary over the last 20 years, recognize that the world is open, recognize that the world is focusing around platforms, and that's exactly what Cisco's doing. Now, before you talk about products, you have to think about your strategy to deal with all of this. So from our point of view, we'll go and talk to our customers about their strategy to be able to deal with complexity in their environment. And we'll say to our customers, think about your strategy for IT around key battlegrounds that are strategic for you as a business. And the first battleground we look at is we say, where everything connects to your network is a strategic battleground. Now, in the past, this was probably a commodity. Who cares? Let's just get people connected. And if we get them connected as cheap as possible, tick in the box, fantastic. But the people who are connecting are your employees who you want to make more productive. your ecosystem and partners who you want to improve the supply chain around, and your customers, you want to make them more sticky. So people are beginning to recognize that actually where people connect to your network is pretty strategic. And maybe it's time to start to make strategic decisions around all of that, as opposed to making point product isolated decisions in general. The second area we think is really important is where what we say where apps and data collide. This is about your strategy of where your resources sit. Do your resources sit in the data center? Do they sit with Amazon and Azure? Do they sit with a SaaS provider? Do you build your own hybrid cloud environment? Well, it's probably all four of those. And how do you deal with that? How do you deal with managing workloads across all of those environments? How do you do it securely? How do you do it with performance guaranteed? Well, that's a pretty strategic decision for your organization. You want to make sure people get access to resources with performance, reliability, and security guaranteed. Well, why are we making loads of siloed decisions along the way in terms of what our storage strategy is, what our compute strategy is, what our data center networking strategy is, what our cloud strategy is? Maybe we should join those together and think a wee bit differently. And finally, the other area that we think customers should focus around is where everything collaborates. It's not where everyone collaborates, it's about where everything, where people to people collaborate, absolutely, but where people to things collaborate, where things to things collaborate. Think back to my example around walking into a telepresence or a video room, and that was about people to things, and things to things all collaborating together. And fundamentally, organizations need to think about that as a strategic proposition for your organization moving forward. And you can't do any of these without putting security at the start of the conversation. We shouldn't put it at the end of the conversation. We need to think firstly about how we secure these battlegrounds moving forward. So this has been Cisco's approach over the last few years in terms of what we've been trying to do. As we defined these battlegrounds, we decided we better build platforms as opposed to products. And we've built platforms out around what we call our DNA architecture, our Spark architecture, and our multi-cloud architecture to support every one of these key strategic battlegrounds. And at the same time, we've built out a security proposition to be able to support every single one of those. Now, I say here this is a platform approach and not a product approach. And it's a platform approach to software-defined networking for all intensive purposes. But there's a couple of differences in terms of the way Cisco approaches software-defined compared to all of our competitors in terms of how they approach software-defined. This is really the principles behind software-defined, and apologies, I'm not trying to teach anyone to suck eggs, I'm just trying to show you the difference. But the reality is you create a sexy application that manages everything, lovely Java-based application. That application connects into a software-defined controller that many people would consider to be the brains of your network moving forward. And what then happens is that software-defined controller passes the instruction or the intent onto the network. So instead of configuring quality of service on 100 routers one by one, we just pass one instruction from the application into the controller, and the controller goes away and configures all of those routers. So instead of it taking a day, it takes 30 seconds. Fantastic. Automation, saved a lot of time. Phenomenal. Many people would say to you that commoditizes all of the products in yellow. That makes all of those things in yellow become anybody's product. It doesn't matter. Okay? Cisco's difference is we don't just automate on a southbound basis from application to controller and down into the network. Cisco actually takes real-time context from the edge of the network, real-time telemetry that's been built into our products for years, but probably you've not had the capacity to take that information off the network because we've all made it too difficult to take that information off the network. But now we're making it easy through this software-defined world for you to take all of that telemetry and information off of the network on a real-time basis. And as you take that information out of the network, the big data out of the network, and you merge it with AI, machine learning, and policy insights, we actually turn it into a learned behavior. We turn it into something that is useful for you. And we get to a point where actually you don't need to manually create automation. The network can create automation for you. So you have a full circle going on here where the context and the learned behavior is then passed into the application, and the application can actually start to build automated intent, learned intent, and deploy that down onto the network. So that delivers some principles for us around differentiation that I'll just talk about quickly. And those principles of differentiation focus on 3 areas. The first of those areas is analytics and assurance. Now, we're a networking company. What are we doing talking to you about analytics? Well, Cisco bought a company called AppD for $3.7 billion a year ago. Why did we do it? Because we realized the importance of real-time analytics for us to be able to manage the network and the application moving forward in the future. You've seen us invest in capabilities like titration in the data center and DNA center assurance for the campus and the branch that's now allowing us to take real-time analytics from the network. And that ability to take real-time analytics from the network is allowing us to break through the glass ceiling of automation, because the second area of our differentiation is automation. People think today, I'll never be able to automate. I'll never get to a point where I reach a glass ceiling in automation. The reality is you will quickly if you don't have real context and information coming from the network. And it's that investment that we're making around that is going to allow us to be able to break through the glass ceiling of automation so that in 3 or 4 years' time, when you've reached that glass ceiling, you'll be able to break through it because we're giving you much more real information to make better business decisions and network decisions. The second glass ceiling we'll break through is the glass ceiling around security. We always talk about putting security in the network and not on the network. And those 2 words, there's a massive difference, in and on. And the reality is, by being able to take much better contextual aware and behavioral aware information from the network, we can define better policies and we can secure the network more effectively than anybody else. These are the principles of our differentiation. And they're not just principles, they're product and capability that's there already today. Just let me talk about this ETA, for example, at the bottom, encrypted threat analytics. Most threats, 70% of threats today will come through encrypted traffic, which you and I can do nothing about because European law doesn't allow me to look inside an encrypted packet. But what about if we used real-time analytics, machine learning and AI to look all around that packet at the behavior of the packet and be able to make a decision with 99.99% accuracy if the packet was encrypted or not? That's the benefit of analytics and capabilities that we're building into these networks as we move forward to help make it easier and more secure for the IT department. So there's a view in terms of some of the differentiations that we've got going on in our multi-cloud strategy and our access strategy for the infrastructure. At the same time, I mentioned we're also building an infrastructure for collaborating, for anything to collaborate. And our vision here is to provide an environment which allows everybody to connect in a frictionless way. I just want to go back to the scenario I painted a minute or 2 ago around me walking into the telepresence room. And it's not just for video. It's for video, it's for messaging, it's for IM, it's for virtual meetings, and pulling all of those scenarios together in one environment that makes it easy for our customers to use. Now, the principles of this sit in the cloud, but the key thing is you have the flexibility and choice to choose whether or not you deploy from the cloud or you deploy on-prem. The beauty of what we're doing here is we're focusing on the end user. Some of my key competitors will focus on the CFO and wrap everything up in a nice enterprise agreement and go to the CFO and say, hey, look at this, Mr. CFO. I can give you all your collaboration needs wrapped up in one beautiful enterprise agreement. This is a delightful experience for the CFO, but the reality is it's not a delightful experience for the user. And ultimately, our principle is about trying to find a way to deliver a delightful experience for the user so you can capitalize on the network and use the network more effectively. And fundamentally, this is focused on open APIs. Everything we do in this environment, back to me talking about linking into the lighting system, linking into the facilities management system, linking into any business application that you want to do, has to be driven by us providing northbound APIs in our portfolio. So we're really excited about how we're bringing all of this together under this Spark platform to be able to collaborate together. So, in conclusion, and I've got a 5-minute warning. So in conclusion, why are we doing all of this? Well, we're doing all of this for 2 main reasons. The first one, as I mentioned earlier on, is to provide a much better user experience for the employee, for the customer, and your ecosystem. To make the network far more effective and easy to use in any scenario from any device. This is the principles of building platforms. The second reason we're doing it is we recognize that we have to make all of the manual processes that exist in our environments today automated. If they're not automated, the reality is the IT department is probably going to fail along the way, and the business isn't going to be the digital business it craves for in the future. So the onus is on all of us as networking providers to be able to build networks for the new world. And this is why we launched the Network Intuitive. The Network Intuitive is Cisco's approach for the branch, for the campus, and for the WAN to be able to drive all of that intelligence and automation into the network. So the reality of everything I've talked about today in terms of automating this environment, in terms of securing this environment, in terms of getting real-time assurance and analytics from this environment, isn't something that's available tomorrow. It's available today. And actually, it's available today on the vast majority of products our customers have already bought. So we're not coming to you and saying to you, upgrade your infrastructure to take advantage of all of this. We're saying to you, it's there now. Take advantage of it and invest in the network investment that you've already put in that network infrastructure over the last 3, 4, 5 years. But it also has another impact on the business. This is a study we did with that bank in the UK that I mentioned at the start of the call, at the start of the session. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I want to show you this figure in the bottom left-hand corner. For those of you who can't see it, it says 4 to 6% savings. That's 4 to 6% savings for the whole of the IT budget, not just the networking budget. Okay? By moving forward and deploying software-defined platforms in their environment, they are now realizing savings that are not driven by headcount savings. Okay, this isn't about getting rid of expensive CCIE engineers. This is about saving in other ways, moving to virtualized technology as opposed to hardware-based technology, reduction in bandwidth costs, moving manual process to automated process. The reality of the world is, yes, IT organizations and network organizations need to think differently. Yes, we need to automate. Yes, we need to improve things for the end user. But we also have to look at how we can manage cost for the future as well. And moving to a software-defined world is reality the only way that we'll do it if we need to scale to connect all of these devices to our networks and manage all of these connections in the future. So in closing, where you need to build a strategy to allow everybody to connect to your network, make sure that strategy provides seamless connectivity. Where you need to provide a strategy to provide access to resources, wherever those resources may sit, I know you want there to be endless scale in terms of your access to those resources, but have endless scale with controllability at the same time and build a strategy around that. And thirdly, once you've got people connected to the network, having access to all of those resources wherever they sit, think about building a strategy that says every interaction, person to person, person to thing to thing, has to be frictionless. It has to be easy. It has to be intuitive. If you can do that, and at the same time make sure you think security first, I think we get to a point where fundamentally we can start to deliver against the needs of the business in a more effective way than we've ever been able to do up until now, and we can drive better profitability, as the previous slide showed. So in closing, it's very important for all of our businesses to crave, to desire, and to be more digital. At the heart, the foundation of becoming a more digital business needs an effective, agile, scalable, and open network environment. Open, scalable, agile network environments won't happen if you build a product, if you build a solution. The only way they're going to happen is if you build a platform to support that business in the future. And we'd love to see you on our stand to talk about the platforms that Cisco's building in the data center in collaboration with Meraki in the cloud and with the Intuitive Network in the campus and the branch, and hopefully excite you in terms of the possibilities that are available for you now and into the future. Thank you very much for your time this morning.